On the second day, I fell, did a little bit of damage to my back and my leg. And there's moments when you feel the 45-degree heat and the 1,000 flies on you and the agonizing back and the agonizing leg. And I'm thirsty and I'm tired and I'm hungry. And I start thinking, why don't I just... This is the moment that I get to experience. I quit. I can't go on. I pushed through really wanting to go as far as I could. This is it. This is what I came for. There are moments in our life when it's actually better to not force yourself through something. I'm very present. I'm not thinking about the rest of it. I'm just focusing on what is here and now and then the next step.
What is the high performance mindset?
It's to be able to connect with...
Jennah Louise is the host of the To Be Human podcast. But a side of her that you might not know is that she's an endurance athlete and has done many ultra marathons. So in this discussion, we spoke about the crazy experiences, what was going through her mind, and how she was able to overcome those mental challenges. And the thing that she did very recently is that she went to Mount Everest trekking, but she went off peak, meaning in winter, where it gets so cold to up to minus 20 degrees. So we spoke about what was that experience like and what kind of self-discoveries she was making. All right, before we kick off with this episode, if you can do me the small favor and subscribe to this channel, I'll highly appreciate it and it'll help me bring you more and more high performance to this show. This is the High Performance Mindset, and today's guest is Jennah Louise. Enjoy this episode. Jennah, welcome to HPM.
Thank you so much for having me. We've just finished you being a guest on my podcast, so I'm really looking forward to our next conversation.
So you've done many ultra marathons. You've done the 100-kilometer ultra marathon in Blue Mountains, Sydney. Single stage, meaning you do it in one go.
Yeah.
You did it twice. The second time, you shaved off 5 hours from your first time.
Yeah.
Which we're going to talk about how you managed to do that. Is it all mental or there was preparation going behind that? And you've done also ultramarathon in multi-stage, spread up 5 days in Wadi Rum in Jordan. You've done several others, and but the one which I do want to dive into the other one, all of them, because they're all big deals. Each and every single one of them is a very big deal, right? But I want to ask you about when you signed up for the 520 kilometer ultra marathon.
Yeah.
Also in Australia, carrying 10 kg backpack.
Yeah.
And you got into it knowing that you won't be able to complete. And you managed to do 344 kilometers. You knew that you won't be able to complete it because you're injured, but you wanted to know what would it feel like to not complete something. Like, why? Like, usually, if you're a person who completes big goals, that means completing something is everything for you. And if it wasn't, you'd just quit. Because there are a million reasons why you should quit. If you want one, you're going to find it in a heartbeat, right? But now you're pushing yourself to be in a situation where there is no way but you'd have to tap out.
Yeah.
Why? Why would you want to do that to yourself?
It's a good question. I feel like for most of my life, I've been a somewhat high achiever. And I feel like I've been very privileged to have an innate drive within me that's always been very committed to whatever I put my mind to. And I've had a deep level of certainty attached to that has helped. And so when I got to being 30 years old, I was at a point in my life in quite a transitional period, and I did not have a goal at that point. And I was really yearning for something defining and big. And this is when I began to explore the realm of ultramarathon running. And I came across this ultramarathon that they hold in Alice Springs in the middle of Australia in the desert called the Track, which, as you said, it's self-sufficient, it's 10 kilos on your back, over 10 days, 520 kilometers or so. And at that stage in my life, I'd been a very sportive and active person, but in terms of running, I sort of never really ran more than 4 kilometers at a time. And I'm a very intuitive person, and there was something that really pulled me towards this event. So I signed up, and I had, I think, about 3.5 months to train for this, which has been referred to as one of them, if not the most hardest ultramarathon in the world, because it is so long and because you are carrying 10 kilos on your back. I began to train, and I very quickly realized it wasn't my mental capacity that was going to stop me. It was my lack of physicality, and that not having very long to train for something so intensive was going to be difficult to match it. And I liked the challenge of that. And as the months went by, I really began to realize, I don't think I actually have the physical capacity to be able to finish this. But I want to start because for most of my life, as I've shared, I have met every goal basically that I've ever set myself. And I think the next moment in my life was to set a goal too big and understand where is that limited sense of capacity and potential right now for me. And I wanted to meet it. I wanted to truly feel like meet something that I had to say, I cannot take one more step. I cannot do anything. I have to quit. And so when I went out there for the first few days, which is very much what happens in ultramarathons, you tend to go a little harder than you should. And on the second day, I fell. And because I had 10 kilos on my back and I'm quite a petite person, it did a little bit of damage to my back and my leg. And so I continued on over the next few days, but I very quickly realized that my leg was not going to start working with me in how I needed to be able to finish these long days. Like some days were 60 kilometers throughout the desert. And so I believe it was on the...
Like, what are the challenges? Like, what are the sensations you're feeling in your leg or your back?
On my back, it felt like I must have done something to the nerve. It felt like a strike of electricity a lot of the time. And because I was continuing to wear this backpack, it was just like right on it, like every single step. And then when my leg started to hurt, which was more of a muscle or a tendon, experience, again, it was like every single step was like a striking pain, and it was agonizing. And particularly at nighttime, what happens is when you lay down, things tend to swell and get very stiff. So when you'd wake up in the morning to begin the next 30 to 60 kilometers, it sometimes takes about 10 kilometers to even warm up. And so what happened with me is I wouldn't even take off my shoes. I'd just sleep with my shoes. I'd basically sleep on what I would have to run the next day, get up. But over those days, it began to be more and more mentally challenging. And
what are the thoughts that were running through your head?
It's very much a roller coaster. Because I think similar to you and your mindset, there's something exciting about the difficulty in it. And so as much as in moment, it can be really challenging, there's still there's an inner fire within us that's kind of like, but this is what we're here for. And so there were moments where it was almost ecstasy, where I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm out in the desert in the middle of Australia, just running free with all these amazing people, and we're expanding our potential. And it gives me goosebumps, like even talking about it. It's just something that's so beautiful to the whole experience. And then there's moments when you feel the 45-degree heat and the 1,000 flies on you and the agonizing back and the agonizing leg. And I'm thirsty and I'm tired and I'm hungry, and I start thinking, why don't I just be a yoga girl? What am I doing out here? And I really start questioning things and start judging myself, and like, who do I think I am? A little bit of imposter comes in, like, why would I even decide to do this? Of course I can't do this. I knew I couldn't do this. Why am I out here? Stupidity and all of this. And then I'll sort of go back into flow and I'll be like, no, this is amazing. And so it's a very roller coaster experience. I remember though on the day that
And when sorry to cut you off, in the darkest moments, and then what are the things you tell Jennah? Like
at that point in my life, because it's very different to what I would do now. At that point in my life, what was I telling myself?
Yeah, because that was harder than if you do it again now.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you're at a stronger mental state right now, but that also makes it less challenging.
Yeah, so what continued to get me through is understanding that I was there to expand my potential. And it wasn't about giving up in the first pain or the first doubtful thought, that it was seeing how far I could get through the pain and the doubtful thoughts until which I could no longer. And a big takeaway for me in that, though, was to recognize that though I am incredibly mentally tough, there are moments in our life when it's actually better to not force yourself through something. And so that was actually, interestingly, one of the key pieces I took away from that experience was I have very much a warrior energy. I kind of power through things in my life. And that was a moment where I recognized, wow, there's actually a lot of wisdom in knowing when to say no more and just surrender to the fact that something cannot be completed. Take the lessons from the experience and move on.
So a part of it, you wanted to expand your potential, get to understand what's your capacity.
Yeah.
And that's why you wanted to put yourself in a situation where it's so big that you'd have to fail. But at the same time, you prove to yourself that whatever your failing point in an ultra marathon, which is something like average people can't finish 10% of it.
Yeah.
So it's already a very huge goal.
I remember the moment because I remember I was walking by this point. Not that you run, most people don't run entire ultramarathons. A lot of ultramarathon running is walking. And I remember on this day, it was like 45 degrees and they had a car that would follow the last person. And on that day, I was the last person and I was hobbling and I was hobbling and I was hobbling. And I was probably about just under 30 kilometers in for that day. And I believe that day was about 66 kilometers. And I just kept pushing through and I was like battling with my ego, being like, you're holding people up. Look at this car. It's waiting for you. It's hot. They're hot inside. Just give up. Hop in the car. Make things easy. Stop inconveniencing people. All these thoughts were running through my head. And then there was this beautiful other side of me that was like, no, like, even if I have to hobble the entire day. And so I had this beautiful moment of like, just be able to serve my sense of self for a moment. I realized how strong my people-pleasing tendencies were at that point in my life, where it was like I was willing to sacrifice continuing to explore that potential because I was so concerned that I was the last person holding people up. in saying that, I did end up quitting that day, and it was a really, really difficult time. I remember I just stopped and I started crying, and I was just like, no, like, I really don't want to quit. I really don't want to. But like the thought of hobbling for another 30 kilometers in that heat at that slow of a pace, I was
what was the pain like at that very
the
point?
pain, it was excruciating. I could hardly move one of my legs, like bend it. So it was like very like straight-legged one leg.
More like you're more just
dragging it. Yes,
it along.
exactly. And then because the nerve, like every time that bag of 10 kilos would like hit the nerve, it's like striking up my neck as well. So it was like, it was a pretty hot mess. But again, I think I pushed through really wanting to go as far as I could. But yeah, I just got to that point where I was like, this is it, and this is what I came for. This is the moment that I get to experience. I quit. I can't go on. And this is the moment of liberation for me, because I'm finally meeting a part of myself at my capacity. And I think I've never truly experienced it until that point, because I'd always completed everything else in my life.
How did that impact you?
To this day, I really think of that day very fondly. I actually ended up having a day off and then running like 103 kilometers a day after that to end like the final day. So there's still a little bit of crazy in me. But I think fondly of it. Now I'm very proud of myself, because I think externally, if you didn't know me, you could possibly assume that, oh, that girl was very naive going into such one of the world's toughest ultramarathon races in the world in under 4 months of training. And yes, there was some naivety to it for sure, but that wasn't the purpose. That wasn't the point. I didn't go in thinking I was going to absolutely smash it. I knew it was going to be extremely difficult, and I had an idea that my body wouldn't be prepared enough for it. So it was a nice experience. I haven't challenged myself like that again. I do look to. I feel like I'm at another point in my life where I'd like to try something that feels bigger than me, because as you shared at the start of this conversation, there's other ultra marathons that I've done, and though they were difficult and hard, I knew that I could finish them. And so it's, though in those moments there's still difficulties, it's a different experience being in something where you're like, I'm in over my head and I'm just going to give it my all and see how far I can go. What's funny?
Like knowing that you're able to do these ultra marathons, like, yeah, I knew I could have done them. So, it's not that.
Well, I think it's that sense of certainty, because I'm not.
Why did you know you could do them? Is it because you've done the training?
My sense of certainty. And yes, of course, the training, but I don't go there to.
The certainty comes from the training, or where does it come from?
No, there's something within me. As I shared earlier, there's something within me that's very innate, and I assume possibly I've learnt it somewhere. But there's just something within me with certain things, and it tends to surround a lot of endurance experiences, that I have 100% certainty that I will not quit with certain things, besides that one thing that I tried that I knew I wouldn't. All these other things, I'm like, I can get through it. It's just this undeniable sense of I can do it.
And I think it requires a lot of mental strength and a peace with yourself to know when you have more in the tank. And that more in the tank doesn't necessarily have to be energy or mentally. No, like physical capacity.
Yeah.
Where if I push more than this, I would injure myself in a way maybe that maybe I won't be able to run anymore? Or
Well, that's the interesting line that I always personally find fascinating. And I always ask people about this because people differ. You have to be so in touch with your body to know where the line is between you're in pain and you can continue, and you're in pain and you're going to do some long-term damage. And that's about developing a very intimate relationship with yourself and your body to know where you're going to cop out and make excuses and say, I'm injured, I'm leaving, and where actually really you can get through it and you can finish. And yes, it might be physically painful, but you're not doing long-term damage. And that's where I draw the line. If I'm not making any long-term damage and the pain that I feel, particularly where I'm at my point in life after the experiences I've had, like there's no way I'm going to quit. I will get through that pain no matter what it takes.
Yeah. I believe, everybody's on their own journey. Again, I believe the real, true confidence in oneself comes from being liberated from going out of the way to meet people's expectations, right? And that's where it shows.
Yeah.
You could be competitive. You want, people to see you as the winner.
Well, I think that's where I differ because I don't need that.
Yeah, no.
The sense of competition that I've developed for me has been with me. And I think that's a huge part of my graciousness in trying these things that most people wouldn't, is because I don't make it about anybody else. And when I go into these endurance races, I know that slow and steady works for me. I know I won't be in the top 10, and that's completely fine because I'm on my own sense of journey. And my goal isn't to be in the top 10. My goal is to be able to do it in a way that honors my best capabilities in that moment. And I think that's what separates me from a lot of other people, is that when other people find out that I do ultra marathons, they're like, oh my God, and they think it's this huge big thing, which yes, it's an amazing experience, but I have no doubt that most people right now, no matter what sort of training they've done, have an ultra marathon in them. I really believe that. And I think that people get too bogged down in the details and that sense of preparation, when a lot of it is just like, get out there and give it a go. And particularly if you have that sense of mental agility and toughness, you can do it. But do it for you. Don't worry about all the external distractions that can stop people from even trying.
Absolutely. And as you said, when you're not too concerned about, what would people think, am I a quitter or whatever, you will not push yourself further where you feel this might be a very costly, injury. For what? End of the day, I'm just doing it for myself.
Yeah.
I'm doing it just for me to expand my potential. I'm just doing it for that very reason.
And that's what I learned about myself in terms of my capacity, my sense of power, was that when I initially started ultramarathon running, there still was this sort of internal conflict with comparing myself to others. And I noticed at any point someone would pass me, I would feel weaker. Right?
Yeah, if you have any competitive sense in you, of course, be like,
just like, I would feel my body getting weaker because of that comparison. And so what I now do is any time that someone passes me, I send them love and I say thank you, because they're inspiring me to pull out more potential in me because of that very experience. And that strengthens me. It's the polar opposite to that comparison, that thief of joy and that thief of power that can come by the ego comparing, not good enough, this is embarrassing, who do I think I am? No, I say, I love you, thank you. And that energy, that gives you a deeper sense of endurance that I've experienced than anything else. And it's interesting because I've had a lot of resistance to embracing that perspective because it feels too light. It feels too not serious enough for expanding my sense of mental toughness. But that's what I found between that first ultra marathon out in Alice Springs and the ones preceding it, is that my journey of really going into the grit and grind versus now, I have moments in my training particularly, but particularly in the race or the event itself, to bring this sense of lightness, love, connection with nature, connection with myself, connection with the people. And that's what I actually do when I'm running. I will routinely connect with me, others, and nature or life or God, universe. And I'll just do that on a cycle. And when you spoke about me doing the single stage ultra marathons and taking 5 hours in 1 year off that 100 kilometers in the mountains, that's why. Because I changed it from this deep sense of pressure to and almost ridicule if I didn't live up to my expectations, to this journey of connection with self, others, and life that just completely energized me in a new way that I could easily not only take 5 hours off, but the next day I didn't even feel like I'd ran 100 kilometers in the mountains the day before.
Because you were pacing yourself.
No, I think it wasn't about the pacing. It was about the deeper connection. It was it was energetically different. And that sense of inner peace.
When you don't have it, it's like a constant...
I'm in flow.
Friction,
harmony.
And that friction wears you down.
Absolutely. Like stress will break you down over a period of time.
Actually, you saying this, you remind me, I forgot Doctor Who, British Indian doctor, he has his podcast.
Ranjit Chatterjee, is it? Ranjan Chatterjee or something?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's a long name. I think it was his interview with... was it with Ross Edgley or is it with Kipchoge? And they were talking about how when we just started applying, they did a research, and if you run and smile while you're running or whatever endurance discipline you're in the middle of, you can go further if you do it while smiling.
Beautiful.
Yeah. There will be time now for those who haven't maybe reached that moment where there is a very big war happening in their head. There will be zero smiling there. Okay. And that's fine. Because that's the time to wake up, push further. That's not the smiling part. But for majority of it, you should be in the smiling and just
it's
trying
that air of gratitude, isn't it? Like when I'm running and I find it really hard, it can just be as simple as being like, wow, like, thank you, feet. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with me and taking me on this journey of self-exploration. Thank you, feet. And that in itself, that connection, that gratitude, again, it's that lightness of energy that I feel like can optimize performance in a way that I don't think is encouraged or celebrated enough.
All right, another crazy endurance event you've completed was the 24-hour military-inspired event where there was 24 of you, only 11 completed, and you were the only female finisher. Please tell me, what was this competition event like?
Yeah. So at that point in my life, I was training in a military-inspired gym, and I loved it. And they would hold these endurance events. And so I did the 6 hour, and then I believe I did the 12 hour, and then there's this 24 hour.
What do you do?
So basically, you go into this 24-hour event not knowing exactly what you would do. That's part of the mental challenge. You just know that it's for 24 hours. What you have an idea about is, because it's military inspired, there's a lot of burpees, push-ups, carrying heavy things, being in the ocean, going on boats, navigation.
Going on boats, meaning?
Like the big rubber boats kind of thing. So going out in the ocean and then like coming back in and working as a team in those rubber boats.
What do you do with the rubber boats? Like, do you
paddle?
You paddle?
Yeah. Which can be quite difficult if it's quite big waves. Can be quite intimidating, especially if you've been awake for a while. You get deprivation you don't really get fed. You don't sleep. Or if they do put you to sleep, they'll be like, all right, go to sleep. And they won't tell you when they're waking you up. And I got great advice before I went in, don't go to sleep. So everyone, you're exhausted. You think about 24 hours of constantly moving, doing military-inspired exercises. It's very challenging. And I could hear people snoring, like basically immediately. And it was really difficult, but I laid there and I was like, I've got this. Like, I know I can't go to sleep, because you know, right, when you go to sleep and then you kind of wake up, you're heavier. You feel like kind of disoriented. Yes. And right. So it's like, keep that adrenaline pumping. So that was a really helpful tip.
I mean, that rest would give you that
Not
sense
necessarily.
recovery, so you can go further or harder.
Not necessarily, because in my experience, it was only for about 10 minutes. And I felt like some people really, because what happens is your body starts to stiffen as well. And so then it cools down, and then like you have to kind of get going again. And particularly if it's like 3 a.m. in the morning, and then you have to go do navigation or whatever, like you're exhausted.
It would make it harder.
It makes it very difficult. So there was a variety of different things that we had to do during that experience. But it was one of those moments in my life where I was just like, wow, I'm so grateful to have this. I knew I would finish, knew it. Just absolutely 100% knew it. I mean, like 5 hours in, I didn't want to go anymore, but I knew I would somehow find something within me to keep going in that 19 hours. What do you say,
like in those moments usually? What is your go-to?
I'm very present. I'm not thinking about the rest of it. I'm just focusing on what is here and now, and then the next step. And then the next step, because I found any moment that I would... What is here
now?
What's right in front of me.
Like a burpee or
what's
whatever.
What's the next thing I need to do? One burpee? Okay, I'll do one burpee. Okay, another burpee? Okay, I'll do another burpee. And it's just that consistency within it. And it's almost like I get into a bit of a flow state. And so you get a little bit hypnotized by the whole experience like that. Because what I realized is the people that were focusing on hours and hours ahead of them, that's why a lot of them dropped out. What was really fascinating for me as a big learning experience is I remember at 22 hours, so we just got 2 hours left. We got taken down to the ocean. It was freezing. And we all got in the water, and we'd been like going through the sand, like on our stomachs and carrying heavy things. And it was absolutely brutal. It was really brutal. And we ended up getting in the water and linking arms, and we're getting smashed by all the ocean, and we choking on water and all this stuff. And I remember looking up kind of like in this daze, and I saw 2 men quit. And it was such
How did they quit?
They just said, I give up. I give up.
Was it in the middle of the ocean, or was it out?
They didn't come in the ocean right at that moment that we're doing all this sand
I'm not going
stuff.
in.
But it was interesting because I remember like in all of that kind of days and at that point I was the only female, so I was linking arms with 10 other men. And I remember looking at these 2 men that dropped out, and I was like, wow, that's the difference. That's the difference, is that somehow they were unable to find it within themselves. 2 more hours. 2 more hours. And I know when I looked at them, I was like, the minute that they go home, they eat something, they go to sleep, they wake up, you know what they feel? Deep regret. I know I know it. And it was very interesting because that just fueled me. I'm like, there's no way. And I got this like big burst of energy because I was like the only female. And I was like, I just felt really proud of myself. And it was very fascinating. So I'm like this little petite kind of person. And I'm like, a lot of people just have no idea what they're capable of because they listen too much to other people's limitations. Find it within yourself to find your own sense of potential and expand your own sense of capacity and see where you can take yourself. Don't worry about other people's perceptions, because I'm sure that if I went into something like that and someone were to say, Jennah Louise, you'll be the only female left at 22 hours and finishing at 24 hours, they'd probably laugh at me. And I've had many experiences like that throughout my life because you know me well enough now. I'm like this little bubbly kind of like excitable person. And it's very surprising for people to hear a lot of my experiences. And so I think that's what I like to inspire in people is be very careful of your sense of limitation of the labels you put on yourself, because it is stopping you from truly experience, I believe, what you're here to experience is that how far can you go in your sense of capacity in this lifetime? And that starts with your own sense of self-belief and you getting to a point where you are focusing on your own relationship with self and then go out from there. And you can learn from others, but it always comes down to your own relationship with self. I really feel like so many of the world's high performers, yes, they have amazing coaches and trainers, but there's something within them that they just had that sense of certainty within them that they want to know, like, where is the line for me? How far can I go?
Couldn't have said it better. And I think it's very important also to, whenever you decide to do something daunting, for whatever reasons, you know, everybody have their own whys. It's important to ask those who have done it and succeeded. Yeah. Don't go and ask those who haven't done it, you know, or did it and quit. You're asking the wrong people. Don't do that. That's something that a lot of people do with many endeavors in life. Like,
or I heard like this person tried this and
it didn't work out. Yeah. Why are you asking him?
Too much noise.
You want to do business? Go somebody who has multiple successful businesses. Not just he has businesses and he's barely breaking even, but I have many businesses. No. Go and ask the person who's successful in their field and ask them, how do they do it? Is it possible for me? And you're going to get that advice. And 1 billion%.
And surround yourself with like-minded people. You know, I'll use myself for example, would you prefer to spend your time with someone that's saying, oh, you know, well, with ultra marathon runnings, like you really need to put in like a lot of training and there's a lot of like preparation and there's a lot of this and a lot of that and a lot of this. Whereas I just meet people, they ask me about it. I'm like, you could do it today if you wanted to. You could absolutely do it today. And it just starts, you can see them starting to be like, oh, why is she saying that? And I think that's so beautiful, in line with what you're recommending, is like, be very mindful of the advice that you seek and the advice that you receive and take.
Amazing. This year, February, you went and did the 3 passes and Everest track in Nepal, which is, when I started Googling it, it's considered one of the toughest hikes in Nepal. And you did it in February, which is in winter. And it's a low season because it's extremely cold, minus 20 degrees. And you
still thawing out in Dubai.
Like, it's so nice over here in February. Like, it's probably one of the best times like to be in Dubai. Like, it's so pleasant. So nice. People are just out having coffee, you know, outdoors. Nice acai, you know. And you decide to go and do this. And you did it with a guide who barely spoke English. despite you did all these crazy ultra marathons, this was one of a very tough experience for
Definitely.
you. Why?
So I've been traveling for just over a year. I came out of a 4-year relationship, and at the end of last year, I was in New York. I spent 3 months in New York last year, but 1 month in December for Christmas and my birthday on my own. And I was sitting in Central Park, and I was looking at Billionaires Row at all the beautiful buildings, and it just very intuitively was like, you need to go to the mountains in Nepal again. I'd been a few years before that and done some trekking with some other people. And so I really felt that. And so I went back to where I was staying, and I booked to go to Nepal. And it's really funny because I think this is both a strength and a weakness of mine, is I knew that I booked the 3 passes knowing it was going to be incredibly difficult. When I got there, I didn't know that it was actually Everest Base Camp as well. And so what's really funny about that, for anyone that's familiar with Nepal trekking, is a lot of people will spend months just preparing for Everest Base Camp. And for me, that was kind of like a bonus as part of the thing I was doing. It kind of like highlighted for a moment a little how crazy I can be. But so it was this beautiful trek. And so I went there. Again, what pulled me towards it, even in winter, I like, it's almost like what David Goggins says, right? It's like about being like, what does he say? There's a word that he used, but basically like unique within the unique, right? And so there's something within me that is like, I don't want to just do like 3 passes in Everest Base Camp when everybody else is doing it. Like, I want to do it in winter when no one does it because it's difficult, even though it's one of the more difficult treks. And so I went there, and I did actually specify that I wanted an English-speaking Nepali guide, but as life would have it, he gave me a man that hardly spoke English, and that was a huge part of the challenge in that experience. So we went out, I think it was about 18 days in total. It was freezing, and the nights were very cold. Like, I had a water bottle next to my bed, woke up completely frozen, like it was in the freezer. That's how cold it was in the rooms. It was freezing. I would hop into my sleeping bag and feel like I was literally cold plunging.
So you couldn't hydrate?
So we would actually be able to get boiled water that they would boil from the stove and then give us that. So yeah, there was a lot of maintenance to it as well, a lot of logistics in terms of hydration and food and everything. What was really difficult about that experience was, yes, physically, because every pass was over 5,000 meters, some up to 5,500, 5,600. And so for anyone that hasn't experienced that, it's high altitude, low oxygen. And so how you would normally take a step would be quick and you've got air. Up there, it's like you're like a sloth with unable to breathe. It's very, very difficult. And again, I'm carrying everything on my back. And so those moments were really difficult.
What are the thoughts going through your head?
It was a combination of thoughts, because I love being in the mountains. If I were to think about like where is home for me, I would say Kenya is one and Nepal is the other. I feel so connected with God, with the universe when I'm in the mountains of Nepal. And so there's a deeply spiritual experience that comes with that I'm just constantly in awe. And there's moments where there isn't a lot of thoughts. The challenging thoughts that happen with me is because I had a guide that didn't speak a lot of English, I obviously could not communicate a lot. And so a lot of the time I had no idea what was going on. So I really had to relinquish my sense of control, because I find when I'm doing challenging things like this, my mind is searching for certainty. So it wants to know how far, how long to go, what, all these questions. And
to give hope. To give yourself some hope.
Let me have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Is it 2 hours? Is it 6 hours? Just around the corner, It's like you can only have so many days around that way. And it was interesting because it brought up a lot for me. And I've done enough self-development work to realize that life will reveal where you're not free. And for me, it was a deep sense of relinquishing and surrendering to the challenge of the moment of being in the mountains. Like I went there for that I really had to do. And so it really turned into this space of isolation for me because it was low season. There were days where we hardly saw anyone. And so I began to get in my head a lot, just walking sort of on my own. And I felt very lonely for a few days. I felt very lonely.
Why?
Because I wasn't having the human interaction that I think I needed when doing something so difficult. Like there were points where it's like it became like I got water poisoning one night, and that was after a massive day on a pass where it took probably 4 hours longer than what it should. It took about 12 hours or something. And I finally got back to where we needed to stay for the night, absolutely freezing. Had some water, but they didn't boil it properly. As soon as I hopped in my sleeping bag to go to sleep at like 5 p.m., I was absolutely exhausted. My stomach started rumbling and I was like, oh man, oh no. Like this is going to be a long night. And so it was moments like those. No one else is staying there. I'm the only female. I just started to feel very isolated. But what I learned from that is these moments that are incredibly challenging, and particularly around that sense of isolation and separation and loneliness, are so growth inspired because I had to connect with me. It was like I had the choice of either remaining in this sense of loneliness or being able to meet my needs for me. And so it was a beautiful moment to be able to really appreciate and experience that. I think sometimes I can move through life very outwardly focused on everybody else. And this was giving me an opportunity to really like take care of me. And so throughout the days that sort of went on past that, I really started enjoying my own company with the mountains, with that sense of God and the universe. And it was interesting because I prayed, I believe that night or around that night, and I said, I really need an angel tomorrow. Like I really feel like I need some support. And it was interesting. I woke up the next day and this dog came in and he didn't leave me. And he ended up walking 5 hours with me to Everest Base Camp. And it was just me, my Nepali guide, and the dog. And it was a really emotional day for me and one of my most favorite days because I felt heard, I felt supported. I felt like I received everything that I needed within that moment.
What do you feel is the voice that tells you that that was a coincidence?
I feel like it's not a voice. I feel like it's a deep inner knowing. I feel like, so I do coaching, more mentoring now, and I say to my clients, synchronicities are milestones. So they're basically telling you that the more synchronicities that you experience in life, the more that you are on your divine path. I truly believe that. That is how I live my life. When I have synchronicities, and I have them daily now, I smile and I say thank you because I know I'm on there. I'm co-creating. And I think I encourage more people to explore what that looks like, that life doesn't have to be friction-based or difficult all the time, that actually when you relinquish this sense of control and need for certainty and really feel into yourself and that deeper sense of knowing, it will reveal the path to you in what you should do or can do, choose to, and it also enables that deeper sense of trust for you to also be able to have faith in what life brings to you in alignment with that, and that anything that feels like it's not aligned with what you want to do, have that deeper sense of faith and trust that it knows it has a higher intelligence than what you think that you do.
Do you feel like, I feel like you have this very good sense of openness for the truth to reveal itself.
Yeah.
And you're constantly putting yourself in adventures that you allow that to expose itself.
Yeah.
you don't just stay in your normal routine day to day. Where
I couldn't. I've done that. I studied law and politics, and I remember on my graduation day, I was like, what do I do now? I don't want to go into law. I don't want to be a lawyer. And I tried it, obviously, because I'd spent 5 to 6 years studying, but very quickly I was experiencing anxiety. I was experiencing depression, living this life that I'd been told and conditioned to believe was the life for me, that it was everything that you would want to be a lawyer, to have money, to be working, with amazing people and have that status. And yet I was so deeply incongruent within myself. And that's what I've learned and I live by and I teach by today is this sense of congruency. Don't worry about what other people are telling you to do or expecting you to do or conditioning you to do. Connect with you. What do you feel like? That deep sense of knowing within. What is it telling you? Listen to the message. Any sense of anxiety and depression that I've ever felt, I have come to learn, has just been a message. And I think we live in a society currently that tells us that we are malfunctioning and that here's a pill to sedate you. And I think where we need to bring more awareness and courage to is that no, your system is working as divine as it ever could be. But do you have the capacity and courage to be able to listen to the message that it's telling you, because it's telling you that you are currently in the life that you're living, you are misaligned. And do you have the courage to not only listen to that, but start acting in a line what makes you feel that deeper sense of congruency that eliminates, not sedates, but like eliminates and dissolves the anxiety and depression that can come with not living a life that is true to you.
And how did the anxiety or depression show up in your life?
It was relentless. I honestly thought I was broken. I really did. I have this video that I filmed of myself years ago, and I couldn't get out of bed. I called in sick to work, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. I think I'm broken. And I really thought it was a life sentence. Genuinely, I thought, this is just how I'm going to be for the rest of my life, and I got to make the most of it, and I hope someone loves me. I really felt like that. And then all of a sudden, I just started questioning who I was, and I was grateful enough to learn the essence of self-responsibility. And I thought, if I can take 100% responsibility for my life right now, how would that change from how I normally think? And going from that victim mindset to I am broken to self-responsibility, that I can get myself out of this situation, has changed everything for me up until this point. And I highly recommend it for anyone else. If you were to take 100% responsibility for your life and the way that you're feeling, how would that change than sitting back and blaming or accepting something that may not necessarily be true?
You've traveled to about, 52 countries?
Yeah.
From all the countries, whatever comes to mind, what are the cultures that when you went was an eye-opener where, these people do it in a different way where it's also beautiful, like, I could learn from this?
Yeah, beautiful question. So when I was 18, I went to Kenya for the first time on my own, and I then proceedingly went back 3 times to continue volunteering with women's groups and children.
What were people saying when you decided to go to Kenya?
Yeah, I think
Australia.
There was a lot of resistance. People very in line with this performance mindset, right? Like people were telling me the limitations and the negativities towards it. What about the possibilities? And so, even my dad, and I have more empathy for my dad, but he genuinely thought, I remember, leaving him and him thinking that he'd have to pay a ransom at some point. It really was, there was a lot of people thought I was very naive and that I would get myself in trouble. And in fact, it was quite the opposite experience, and that's why I bring it up. I ended up living out in the Rift Valley in a manyatta with some families, and we'd go daily and walk and get water, and I loved that. I loved that sense of connection with nature, connection with a slower way of life, and community. And yes, there were other limitations that I think could be explored. I don't think women had a voice as much as I would want them to. And I had experiences of that which I helped as much as I could. But it was that sense of community and family and people working together that really pulled towards me. I've lived in a lot of Muslim countries. I lived in Tunisia and Turkey, and obviously I'm here. I have a profound respect for the air of family orientation that comes with that. I really, really am pulled towards that. I feel like coming from Australia, we just don't have it to the depth that I've seen over here. And it's something that I feel is very wholesome and very warming and very necessary. And I think I see a lot more love and connection between people that had that deeper sense of community and family than what possibly I've grown up with in Australia.
Beautiful. All right. On a final note.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what is the high performance mindset?
It's to be able to connect with your true sense of self and be able to perform from a space of love, curiosity, and connection in the enthusiasm for your own sense of expansion and pure possibility of capacity.
Thank you very much, Jennah.
Thank you so much.
An amazing journey.
To the next one.
Thank you so much. Yeah, to the next one.
Thank you.
There's a lot of questions I didn't ask.